Hello and welcome to another lecture of Econ 2301. This lecture is a special one in which I'm going to cover the government shutdown. By now you have probably heard of the government shutdown. However, it is highly unlikely that you understand how it works. This lecture is not a political one, whether the government shutdown was correct or wrong. What I'm trying to do with this lecture is just educate you on how the government shutdown works and what happens economically as far as what gets paid and how those decisions are made. So when we look at federal spending, we know that there are two types of spending bills. These are appropriation bills that are passed by Congress. If you have taken a government class, you might recall that we separate the spending from the executive branch of government, which is the President of the United States, as well as the Treasury Secretary and the Office of Budget and Management, from the legislative branch, which is Congress. The reason we do this is so that we have a checks and balance system. Well, every time Congress wants to pass a bill and fund it, they must pass an appropriations bill or a spending bill. This bill then goes to the Office of the Budget and Management or the Treasury Secretary, and they actually pay the bills. There are two types of these bills. The first one that I'm going to look at is actually on the right side. That is entitlement and mandatory spending. If you look at the top right of your slide, you see the definition of that is spending that Congress has authorized by prior law, primarily providing support for individuals. These are things such as Medicare, Medicaid, retirement, things that have been in place for a long time. We don't like to change these that often, and there's no need to really change these that often. Think of it this way. If you are on disability or had Medicaid insurance, you wouldn't want to wait every single year for Congress to pass a spending bill in order to fund it. You would like to go as is. Now, the other type of bill, and this is the one that's affecting the government shutdown, is discretionary spending. This spending bill is something that's passed annually. The reason why it's passed annually is that things change constantly. Now, Congress is not allowed by law to pass a bill on military that goes longer than 2 years when it comes to spending. And typically, we just fund military every single year within the discretionary spending, and I'll show you that in just a second. So you might be asking, well, how does this work, this discretionary spending or the spending bill? The way it works is everything that Congress passes over the summer session that they're in session needs to be funded and paid for, all of government spending. The way that they do this is they pass the discretionary spending bill. This used to be done at the very first of the session. This was done so that Congress knew how much money was available, and then they would debate between themselves and decide what was the most essential or non-essential and go from there. And then at the end, if your bill did not get passed or there was not enough money, that's okay. The spending bill was already passed and Congress could go home. Well, over the years, Congress got wise on the fact that they couldn't pass everything they wanted to, and so now they pass the spending bill at the very last. Now this typically goes okay. Usually they pass all kinds of bills throughout the session, the summer session, and then finally they pass the spending bill. They have a pretty good idea as they keep adding on other bills. This goes great as long as they all get along or they're able to compromise. Once again, this is not going to be a political lecture, but I'm just going to tell you what somewhat happened. There was a specific law this time that did not want to be funded by Congress, and because of that, or some parts of Congress, they decided not to pass a spending bill. Now, whether you are for one side or the other is irrelevant. What I'm going to talk about is what happens when the spending bill does not get passed. So this spending bill did not get passed. So let's look at the budget and the various outlays or expenditures that are included in it. You'll notice under the categories that we have discretionary spending and entitlement and mandatory spending, that, if you recall, entitlements and mandatory spending up here is authorized prior by Congress, and if a budget does not get passed or a spending bill does not get passed, the Office of Budget and Management or the Treasury Secretary together will decide what gets paid, and they're already told how to spend this money, this entitlement and mandatory spending. So they don't have any discretion when it comes to this. They just spend the money. Now you might be asking, well, if they're not authorized to spend money, where's the money coming from? Currently, people are still working. Even though the government's partially shut down, there are people working all over America. In fact, more people are working astronomically than people are not working, as far as before the shutdown, vice versa, because more people are in the private sector. So anytime you get a job or income, a paycheck, part of that goes to taxes. This revenue funds government. So money is still coming in. It's just not coming in and being told what to do with it. That's the problem. So if we look at this, Congress has already authorized the Budget and Management Committee, or office, to spend money, and so they're going to spend this money. You see Social Security's under there. I've already covered that. Medicare and Medicaid. This other thing, this other category is other programs. This is the one that people have made the biggest deal about. And the reason being is, under other programs, there are things such as education, some education bills, as well as Congress themselves and the President of the United States. You've probably heard people talk about them getting a paycheck during the shutdown. That's because they are included in mandatory spending. Remember, this is already authorized, and the Treasury Secretary doesn't have a choice on this matter. They have been told already prior that they must pay these bills. So if Congress's paycheck or income is included, then they're going to pay those particular bills. So what comes next after the mandatory and entitlements, if there's any money left over? Well, next is net interest. We don't even get close to paying defense until we pay our net interest. In fact, the best way to look at this is net interest should be paid above everything, even the entitlement and mandatory spending. However, Congress hasn't told the Office of Management and Budget to spend this money yet, but they're going to spend it. You might be asking, well, isn't that money we owe to China and other countries? Yes. Why do we have to spend it? Because we owe them money. And it's kind of like your own credit card. Let's say you had a credit card at 0 to 2.5% interest rate, and you miss one payment. As soon as you missed a payment, your interest rate might go up to 30%. That's a lot, and it could be catastrophic. In fact, we have never defaulted on the debt. If we do, it would send us into almost an instantaneous depression. My own personal opinion is that while the government shutdown is important and we need to look at it, nowhere near as important, not even close, as the debt. And we need to look at that very closely. That's a whole nother lecture on how we go about tackling that. But let's just put it this way. Right now we need to pay our interest. And you'll notice that it's net interest. Right now we do not pay any of the debt. Or principal, we only pay interest. And this amount, although it's only 1.3% of GDP, that's just interest alone. And that's a significant part of the budget. And we need that to stay as small as it is. As soon as we default or something happens, our credit rating goes down because we don't pay this, it could be very catastrophic, like I said. So if there is still some money left over, what gets paid next? Well, discretionary spending. And you'll notice under discretionary spending, it's divided up into two categories, which is defense and non-defense. Now, this is where there's some leeway and discretion on who gets paid and who gets sent home on furlough. This is where you hear the terms essential versus non-essential employees. What the Office of Budget and Management has to do is determine who is an essential employee for the government and vital to the operations and functioning government, and who is non-essential and could be sent home. Well, the government so far has decided that military, thank goodness, are essential, and so we're still funding the the military. They did decide, and this makes sense, and some people argue that it probably doesn't make sense, but it is logical. They decided that all of the parks, the national parks, libraries, things like that, museums, should be shut down. If you think about it as far as food chain terms or hierarchy, they're not that vital to government functioning. Now, that means that some people, and roughly 800,000 people in America, are going to be on furlough or asked to go home, and they have been. This is how we decide who gets paid, who stays home, and who goes to work during a government shutdown. I hope that this educates you on how it works, the various types of spending. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is jkemper@southplainscollege.edu. You can also follow me at Twitter @Mr. Kemper.